He said he doesn't have the audio either. It's not connecting him to audio.
In the meantime, there is a verdict in the how we doing? Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yep.
Phil, you still there? So, Jeff, where are you moving to?
Fairfield, Connecticut.
Oh,
Yeah.
not too far, but far enough.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have gone this far if I had to get into the office every day of the week. Luckily now, if I do it when I do go back in, it's like once or twice a week. So
Once
Yeah,
we
that
get, Sorry.
What-
Once we get Bill McKaith in, we should be able to start.
What about Joe? Did we figure that out? Yeah, I don't see Joe here still.
Yeah, he's still in the attendee list.
When Rick returns, we can probably just Zoom him on as an attendee. But I want to double check that with Rick when he comes back.
Yeah, I think the only thing we could say is
Yeah.
maybe, Joe, if you try to disconnect and reconnect again, we can try to bring you in as a panelist. But for some reason, it's just not letting us promote you.
But Rick, can we just feature him? I mean, even if he's in the audience.
It doesn't look like he's got any audio connected that I can see that we could unmute.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's just not fully connected to the meeting.
Jeff,
Yeah, yes.
can you give me his phone number? I'm gonna talk to him directly. Or give Rick his phone number and Rick can talk to him directly.
Yeah, let me see.
Christine, if you just want to email that to me, that'd be fine.
Wait, I have to look for a pen. 1 second.
All right, let me,
Jeff,
yes.
what is his number?
Sure, it's going to be 404.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, you are live right now.
Oh, yeah, no, let's not do that.
But
Oh,
no,
yeah,
no one.
Kristen, let me email it to you.
Okay, and Richard, email it to Richard_Hoar. That's HOAR at fitnyc.edu.
Okay, and I'll send to your FIT address.
Mm-hmm.
think maybe we should get this event started.
We are waiting for Bill McKaith to receive the award.
Okay. So we never got Joe on the phone.
Rick is supposed to call him.
What's going on with Bill? He can't get in?
Yeah, Bill's on. First of all, it said, yeah, sorry about that, guys. It said I had the wrong email address in the system, and then
Yes.
I couldn't unmute you or get my video started.
Okay, great. So you're on, Bill. So yeah,
Where
so we
is he?
can get started.
Oh, there he is.
Can
Yeah,
you
sorry
start
about that.
recording, Stacey?
It's recording already.
Okay, great. Okay, Shannon, you can start.
Great. So welcome everyone to the opening of ITM's Talking Trade at FIT Lecture Series, which is now on its 32nd season with over 80 events and 250 guest speakers since its inception in 2005. I am Shannon Mayer, Interim Dean of the J. and Patty Baker School of Business and Technology. In addition to today's topic, managing your suppliers during the pandemic, organized and emceed by ITM's advisory board member, David Uricoli, it is a landmark occasion as we have the privilege to recognize Bill McGrath's significant contribution to the evolution of the ITM program. Bill is the Chief Supply Chain Officer for PVH and is a legend in the industry. Based in the company's New York City headquarters, Bill oversees the company's global supply chain operations and is responsible for the development of its global production structure, process and manufacturing footprint, and servicing the needs of all PVH's retail and wholesale divisions. Before joining PVH, Bill held leadership positions in global sourcing, manufacturing, supply chain operations at Walmart, Spiegel Brands, Victoria's Secrets, and Limited Brands. While operating in Asia, Bill was Warnaco's Senior Vice President of Worldwide Operations. A stately native of Scotland, Bill serves as an honorary professor of Glasgow Caledonian University and has been a leading figure in ITM's advisory board, where he arranged the international trade practicum visits to PVH's operations abroad. He has presided over numerous guest lectures on the past, present, and future vision of the global supply chain management. Namely, he streamed a lecture with the U.S. Ambassador of Ethiopia and local producers for American brands and pioneered the world's entry into Africa as a major production center for the fashion industry. So it is with great pleasure and pride that I present ITM's Global Service Excellence Award to Bill McGrath. Bill, if you would please show us your award.
So I think there is, yeah, so I'll talk. The award is actually in the top right picture there. And just so you know, I'm actually in a hotel right now. I'm just about to leave to receive my second vaccine as just before I transition back to Scotland for my, what I would call my pre-retirement. So I'm retiring from the industry, going into what I call a pre-retirement phase. So leaving PVH, leaving kind of the industry level business, but staying within the industry at a more global level. So Shannon, first of all, I would say thank you very much for introducing me. I think the longer it takes to introduce you, it's just a sign of how much older you are. And so I preferred the short introductions in the early days. And again, I appreciate the kind words that you've used I've learned as I get older not to reject kind words because there are so few around now for me. I just embrace them all. So thank you. Look, I'd like to thank yourself. Obviously, I'd like to thank Christine for actually giving me the honour to actually participate with the group on the International Trade and Marketing Group. As I kind of reflect on the people that I've engaged with, some of the lectures that I have given, both on Future Vision and on the Ethiopia opportunity, I think today that back then, when in my first engagements here, this was very relevant. I think that relevance has been amplified significantly as the world has gone, as industry has gone global, but also as a consequence of the pandemic. I think never has it been more important to understand the global landscape that we have in front of us. And I think that we are in a 30-year event right now, where the whole landscape of our industry, of supply, of how the consumer engages with us is in a macro level change that presents huge challenges, but with those challenges equally presents huge opportunities. And quite frankly, one of my regrets is kind of exiting the supply chain at this point in my career, because never have I seen such an exciting period ahead for people who continue within it. So I don't think you've heard the last of me. I'm driving 3 huge industry initiatives just now on cotton traceability, onshoring back into Europe in a mass regeneration waste zone to actually take circularity to industrial level scale. And I will continue to engage directly across the industry in those 3 initiatives. But again, thank you. This has been great. I appreciate the award, and over time would love to stay in touch. So thank you. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Bill.
So, good afternoon. And were we doing the link for the video, or are we going to wait for that till the end? Nope. Okay, so anyway, good afternoon and welcome to Talking Trade at FIT, managing your suppliers during the pandemic. Thank you, Shannon. I'm David Uricoli, Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability Consultant, and previously at Ralph Lauren for the last 32 years, and now for my own organization, appropriately named Uricoli Consulting. And I will be your moderator today for the panel. The pandemic has affected everyone across the world. Major companies have had to adapt their perspective on strategies and play a part in dealing with this crisis. Today, we will hear from 3 vastly different major global companies' perspective on how the global pandemic has reshaped the way they are managing their challenges and changes in doing their jobs. First, we will hear from Phil Marsom, Director of Internal Audit Factory Compliance for VF Corp. Then we will hear from Mr. Jeffrey Debany, newest Deputy Director of Corporate Partnerships at UNICEF USA. And finally, from Mr. Joseph Ruiz, Vice President at the UPS Foundation. So after we listen to all 3 presenters, we will take questions through the WebEx Q&A box. So please send any of your questions through the Q&A box, and in the event you see a chat box, please don't use that, and please just use the Q&A box. And panelists, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, but more importantly, please do not forget to unmute prior to speaking. So we're going to start with our first panelist, who is Phil Marsom. As I said, he's the director at VF Corp, and Phil has been with VF since 1981 and has been working in compliance since 2002. Currently, Phil serves as a member of the Fair Factories Clearinghouse board of directors, a member of RAP's advisory board, and a participant in the American Apparel and Footwear Association Social Responsibility Committee. Phil makes his home in Greensboro, North Carolina, so please join me in welcoming Phil.
Thanks, David. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit today about factory compliance and the impact of COVID. Now, a little different tack on this in terms of obviously the impact it has in terms of deaths and illness and all that. But the way I'm looking at it through this presentation is COVID is really a catalyst for change. Next slide. So I always like to start a little picture. The feeling is, was this before and after? Certainly the slide picture is interesting. We've never been like this, but even the factory on the left, which looks nice, large lips, living at this area, wearing with shoes. No matter where you are, there's opportunity improvement. Be a disaster on one side or a pretty good factory on the other. Next slide. So I think PF, like many companies, it started with a pretty traditional model when it came to factory compliance. It was all about reputational risk mitigation. We don't want somebody to find something bad in one of our factories because it will impact negatively on our brands. So like all or most companies, we conducted many audits, developed many corrective action plans, and formed a communication strategy. So if there was ever a question about what is VF doing, well, we're auditing and we're developing corrective action plans. And that's really was pretty much the extent of the program. And we repeated this for many, many years. And occasionally there'd be an NGO or CSO with a complaint. They'd send it in and we'd do follow-up work directly on that. But a pretty simple model, and it worked fairly well. But obviously as times change and objectives changes, and as we learned, we started to move on. Next slide. So rather than thinking about reputational risk as the primary driver in what we do, we started thinking about worker risk, which really makes much more sense. So, what can we do to assure that people can go home safely at the end of the day? They can go home paid properly at the end of the day, and they can go home at the end of the day, most importantly, with hours of work and things of that nature. So we started encouraging transparency through really a simple mantra. Findings are good. They're not bad. The more we can find and learn about operations, the more we can identify opportunities for improvement. And making those improvements is going to become really the cornerstone of our program as we move forward. So findings are good. We put together a good corrective action plan, and performance against that corrective action plan really becomes the metric by which we measure factory performance. So if I find a really bad thing in a factory, child labor, locked doors, no alarms, things of that nature, obviously pretty bad stuff. In the past, we would have just flat out rejected a factory. But now we put together a corrective action plan, follow up on that, recognize performance against that, and we feel like we have a system that works not just better for our reputation, but better for the workers themselves. And in addition, more participation on industry initiatives, SCP, Better Work, RAP S8000. And what can we do to be more efficient and a better player in the community? And so these three areas we started working on really a couple of years before COVID hit, and then COVID hit. Next slide. So if we're talking about findings being good, and now I'm in a situation where I can't visit a factory, how am I going to handle that? What do I do? How do I communicate with the factories? How to make sure that they have proper COVID precautions and systems in place. So, right off the bat, we delayed our audits, thinking that COVID would be done with by June, July of last year. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So we've transitioned into virtual audits. So opening up communication through the phone, taking walking tours through the factories with smartphones, and where we aren't real effective in terms of seeing everything that we would when we're in person, we at least maintained those communications with the factories, and we found out what we do with masking and health checks and sanitation, and as well as the conventional stuff with payroll and hours of work and health and safety, and as well as the corrective action plans that we had developed before COVID. So it has made it to keep that communication open. And as COVID started easing up in certain locations, we were able to go in and conduct local audits with both our internal team that we have in place, as well as third-party teams that may have a presence in a place we're not in. So made that gradual transition in terms of moving from just talking nicely on the phone, getting some bodies back in place, and moving back towards that initiative that we had in place, which is, looking for findings and developing corrective action plans. At the same point in time, we strengthened our relationship with these industry initiatives and started having comfort level of, they're looking for the same kind of findings that we're looking for. They have those same kind of communications with the factories we have, and trying to take full advantage of those direct one-on-one connections, their physical presence in these locations, and keep the program advancing forward. Next slide. Which takes me to where I'm talking about in terms of COVID being a catalyst. There's certain aspects of what we were able to do this past year that we probably never would have tried without the restrictions that COVID placed upon us. The direct phone calls, the trust, establishing trust and better forms of communication and more positive forms of communication. So as we take those learnings away from what happened this past year, so well, what are we really going to do different? How, if you go back, audit, cap, and repeat, now we're looking at things a little bit differently and how we can be more efficient in what we do. So strengthening ties with the industry initiatives, SLCP, Better Work, and taking a hard look at certifications where they're appropriate, and using that information that they gather and rather than that as maybe a side contributor to the factory compliance program, thinking about that as the primary source of information for factory compliance. But at the same point in time, we really feel strongly about the need to have that one-on-one presence, the on-the-floor presence, to really understand. So the way we're driving the programs, we're looking at a data analytics to determine what do we need to do and where do we need to go. Issues in China are not the same as they are in Cambodia or Indonesia or the United States or Guatemala. So we're looking at being very targeted with our approach. So it may be in Guatemala where we take a hard look at freedom of association, and in China we're looking obviously at forced labor. Cambodia and Vietnam might be health and safety issues that'll drive the program. So we're going to take an opportunity where we have general coverage through industry initiatives and industry certifications, and then we can go in and look specifically at certain topics and do deep dives and form those corrective action plans that will help mitigate the worker risk down the road. So in addition, we're looking at gathering more information directly from the factories on number of accidents, number of health issues, and we're beginning to track those along with our own facilities and where we'll have some defined metrics and recognize performance against those metrics as well. So we've seen this compliance evolve over the years, and we always wonder, what do we really need to do next to make it better? Well, you know, as we learn from COVID, it's really about being efficient. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities that are out there for not just visiting factories, but communicating with factories, putting together those corrective action plans. And it's about driving improvement where those opportunities are the greatest to mitigate worker and obviously reputational risk as well. So I hope that helps give you an idea about how we transition through the COVID timeframe. Certainly health from the part of our workers was paramount, but we still people hanging out, factories hanging out there, workers hanging. So we wanted to drive this thing forward and make improvements where those opportunities existed. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Really appreciate that. It certainly does seem like VF has done quite a few updates to your program to keep up with the latest challenges during this pandemic. So thanks, Phil. And so our next speaker, as you see, is Jeff Debany. And as I said, Jeff is recently promoted to Deputy Director of Corporate Partnership at UNICEF, where he works with companies supporting UNICEF through technical partnerships in areas such as emergencies, logistics, the WASH program, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, and infrastructure. Interestingly, Jeff began his career directing contemporary art exhibitions around the globe, including for the Winter Olympics in Torino, Italy. Jeffrey holds several degrees, but our favorite is his bachelor degree in international trade from FIT. So thank you and welcome, Jeffrey.
Great. Thank you, David. And thank you, everybody, for having me today. So how I'd like to begin my portion of our talk is speak to you a little bit about UNICEF itself. There is a lot of misunderstanding about what UNICEF does and does not do and how we work. And then also work into then the role of UNICEF USA and how that works with the UNICEF headquarters. And then also then go into my role there and how that's changed through the COVID pandemic. So some of you might have experience with UNICEF, primarily as a child, through the Trick or Treat for UNICEF with the orange boxes, going around collecting change from your neighbors and people in your neighborhood, or on international flights at airports for the Change for Change campaign where they collect local currency. All of that money does go to UNICEF. Through a large network of intermediaries to be able to put that into programming. So anybody who has done that, I thank you for that. UNICEF works in over 190 countries and territories around the world. Its sole mission is to save and improve the lives of the world's most vulnerable children. We are the world's largest children's humanitarian organization in the world and the world's largest procurer of vaccines, vaccinating over half the globe's population of children and adolescents. Again, and we will see later why we are very well positioned during this pandemic to help provide vaccine coverage. We do this through programs such as vaccinations, education, child protection, and empowerment, WASH, and emergency relief, among other programs. One thing that is a bit of a misconception about UNICEF is we are not a charity. We are a non-governmental developmental agency of the United Nations. So basically what that means is we're not one of those organizations that comes, pitches a tent after an earthquake and then leaves when the money dries up or when the interest in the cameras move elsewhere. We work directly with countries. In fact, we're not allowed to operate in a country unless we are officially invited by that government. But we do work directly with the government officials and ministries of health, ministries of education, etc., to help develop long-term systemic change. Now, where UNICEF USA, which is where I work, sits is UNICEF is not allowed to operate. As I mentioned, we're only allowed to operate in countries where we're invited. But there are countries, 33 particularly, called National Committee or National Donor countries, United States, France, United Kingdom, Italy, etc., higher developed nations, economically developed nations. And so they have developed what are called national committees, which are independent in the United States, 501c3, which is a charitable IRS status, basically meaning that we can operate as a non-for-profit organization within the territory of the United States. And we serve here as the public face and dedicated voice of UNICEF within the United States. So the Trick or Treat for UNICEF, things like that. When you go onto your television and see ads, or on YouTube you see ads, that comes from UNICEF USA. UNICEF USA was actually the oldest national committee. We are founded 1 year after UNICEF in 1947 by silent film star and humanitarian Helenka Pantaleone, who was the grandmother of actress Téa Leoni. A lot of people don't realize how important that Leoni family is to the world's children, and so we do thank her every chance we get, and we watch all of her wonderful shows. As I mentioned, also we are the largest, the oldest, but also the largest donor to UNICEF. And that includes governments around the world. So UNICEF USA has brought in over $6 billion in funding since 1947. And so that's a significant income to UNICEF. I believe the second would be, it tosses up between Japan and the Netherlands, but UNICEF USA significantly by far. My role at UNICEF USA is I work in our corporate partnerships team. So I basically work with corporations, Fortune 500 companies, as well as smaller companies, to work with UNICEF programming in country. So we basically have two different, what we call verticals or pillars, however you want to use that, break that up. One of those is our CRM, which is cause-related marketing based. So when you see Louis Vuitton and they have blue bags, and a percentage of the sale of those bags go towards UNICEF, which is a program we've had in the past. That would be under that platform. Our platform is more on a technical angle. So I work with corporations who are more interested in developing program, monitoring and evaluating program, and being on the ground in some degree with the staff at UNICEF. I handle direct cash grants, but also I mainly focus on partnerships where the partner also contributes, whether it be expertise, in kind. One of our partners, big and valued partners, is UPS, and they provide us a tremendous amount of in-kind air freight, as well as advice for supply chain and logistics, as well as cash grants for trace and track and vaccine stock management, which has become very important now with COVID. COVID has changed everybody. It's changed everybody's industry. It's changed everybody's life. Obviously, we're all doing this virtually. Otherwise, we would have been together in a room. And UNICEF has not been immune to this as well. I would say that the biggest area where UNICEF has been affected most by COVID, besides the logistics of working, would be also in how programming and how our donors have been interacting with programming. And everything now has, there's been a much greater emphasis on WASH programming, and which is interesting. There's one partner I'm working with now, and they're the largest oral care providers in the world, and they also do hand health and soap. And what was interesting was working with them to develop a program to distribute over 27 million bars of soap around the world this past year, primarily to areas in Africa and Central Asia. One thing that was very interesting was working with them, and them coming to us and saying, we would like you to help us develop a healthy hand program, which just struck us as an interesting aspect, is the fact that here you have a titan of an industry now looking at hand health in a very different way. And we're seeing that across the board with a lot of our partners. But it's also created some challenges too with how we work. And so there are a lot of guidelines that UNICEF has, such as programming can't, even though we have partners who are instrumental in programming can't be seen as being driven by partners. So a town in Uganda can't receive goods such as education product kits or what we call that school in a box, handheld soaps, etc. And they can't be handed that and say, oh, and this is care of this corporation. So so we have to be very careful with the guardrails on how donations and donor interaction works actually on the ground. COVID has increased some of the technicalities around that, and I think largely because corporations are very eager to help right now, in particularly corporations who maybe would have sat on the sidelines of other emergencies because they maybe thought it wasn't part of their expertise, but now everybody is joining the fight, and it's finding challenges on how to work with them and also directing them to where the need is. So that's been really the challenge. Other than that, UNICEF has been really firing on all cylinders, and this is what we do. So I can't say it's really fundamentally changed how we work. It's just intensified it, and it's made us sleep a lot less. So over.
Well, thank you very much, Jeffrey. It certainly is amazing the work that you are doing and the work that UNICEF does, and we're grateful you're here, especially during a time like this. So thank you. And so now our third and final panelist is Joseph Ruiz from UPS. The UPS Foundation leads the global citizenship programs and initiatives for UPS. As Vice President, Joe is responsible for UPS health and humanitarian relief efforts, including the UPS Foundation's commitment to accelerate vaccine equity across continents. In addition to his corporate responsibility, Joe serves on the Salvation Army National Advisory Board, the Good 360 Disaster Recovery Council, and is a former member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Risk and Resilience, and former vice chairman of the Center for Disease Philanthropy. So with that said, welcome, Joe.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure you can hear me.
Fine. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, listen, I just want to thank my fellow panelists for their comments, and it's always an honor to be on a panel with Jeff, and UNICEF is one of our fantastic partners. Like UNICEF, UPS, I think everyone knows UPS. You may not be familiar with the UPS Foundation. The foundation manages the corporate social responsibility efforts, but like UPS, I'm sure you've all gotten to know us very well over the last year as people began to order everything online. Likewise, the foundation has rapidly escalated its activities to meet great needs around the world. On the next slide, or I don't know if you've got slides, David, but if you go to slide, go to the next slide, David, slide 2. Just wanted to give you a sort of a view of UPS. We're a large company, a global company, more than 500,000 employees, around 220 countries and territories. And of course, we in the foundation try to leverage our strengths. So a lot of what we do in the foundation, as Jeff mentioned earlier, is tied to humanitarian logistics. We have 4 focus areas in our foundation: humanitarian relief, equity and economic empowerment, which has been very important with what's been going on across America over the last year. We support the cradle to C-suite efforts to help lift underutilized and under-resourced communities. We also support a lot of local engagement. We're a global international brand, but Over the last number of years, our people have, and our employees have volunteered more than 20 million hours in local communities. And in 2020, we also surpassed a major planet protection goal. We set a target to plant 15 million trees by 2020, and we surpassed that. And last year, in October, we announced a new target to plant 50 million trees by 2030, which is the end of the Sustainable Development Goal period. And on the right, you can see a number of our programs and signature efforts that we have, including things that really tie to our strengths. Road safety, we run a program that enables teenagers to learn the skills that are taught by skilled volunteers who teach them the expertise that we have on the road, and also a number of other projects. But what I'd like to share with you as we move into our humanitarian relief efforts, that when COVID hit, the fact that we have a strategic framework for our humanitarian relief program enabled us to really escalate our efforts. On the next slide, David, if you would go to the next slide. Our humanitarian relief program is really built on 4 pillars. I always like to, go from right to left across all the spectrum of disaster relief. We work on preparedness and resilience, response, long-term recovery, and what we've learned is that those skill sets also help us with healthcare and strengthening health systems. It starts on the right with building strategic partnerships with great organizations. We work with all the UN organizations like UNICEF and some of the large international NGOs. We also provide skilled volunteers that will deploy in the aftermath of a disaster for the global logistics cluster, and we've embedded UPS logistics experts with organizations for up to 9 months to help them build capacity. We also focus on thought leadership, technology. A few years back, we built the first drone network in Rwanda in partnership with Gavi and an organization called Zipline. That organization today has built and delivered 20,000 vaccines to rural Ghana. David, if you go to the next slide, I want to show you one of our relief flights that we took off last year. We basically had responded to unprecedented need from the pandemic, as well as one of the most active hurricane seasons in the last 15 years, supporting more than 50 million people throughout the year. David, if you would advance the slide, I'll talk about our efforts with COVID-19 on slide 5, if you will. So in 2020, UPS and the foundation responded by providing more than $22 million in grants, in-kind, and technical support. That support was spread over more than 115 countries. We did 4 times the number of shipments, responding to hotspots all over the world, providing 4 really focus areas that we had: getting healthcare supplies to hotspots, supporting education, trying to keep kids able to learn from remote location, trying to sustain livelihoods, and addressing food insecurity. In all, we moved more than 12 million pieces of PPE. Back as early as last January, we were sending PPE to China and multiple locations. We worked with UNICEF to mobilize supplies to Venezuela, one of the most dire humanitarian crises in the world. We're very honored to provide support to UNICEF to get medical supplies, PPE, and oxygenators into that country. We also, you can see, we moved books, laptops, work with an organization called Operation Hope that provides financial recovery consultation, so families that have been impacted by COVID could learn how to talk to their creditors, and also small businesses learn how to apply for PPP and other support during the pandemic. And finally, one of the things we're really proud of is the idea of providing meals, particularly to children who are missing their school lunches on the government program. UPS helped to deliver more than 27 million meals last year. On the next slide, David, if you will, as the year began to wrap up, we started to talk to many of our humanitarian partners. UPS has been working very closely with all the vaccine developers and manufacturers, and we saw that there was, as vaccines started to roll out across the U.S., and we saw the call for a need, working with UNICEF and the COVAX with Gavi. UPS in early March pledged to help accelerate vaccine equity around the world. We committed to delivering 20 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine. We're also working to donate ultra-cold freezers to those countries that are using the Pfizer vaccine, which requires a -70 ultra-cold chain freezer. We're moving those supplies out to multiple countries. We're part of the delivery, the very first COVAX delivery in Ghana, which we're very proud of, delivering 600,000 of those vaccines in country to regional dosing sites, and also deliver those to our drone nest, which has now delivered over 20,000 vaccines to rural clinics in Ghana as well. We've also sent freezers to places like Bhutan, Mongolia, Ukraine, and Georgia. Recently, we've reached out to Malawi and working with them. We've also provided support to organizations like UNICEF and WFP, as Jeff said. We're helping to support vaccine security by providing funding for the GS1 barcode so they can track those supplies, and also the stock management tool, which allows the ministries of health to manage their stocks. We're also working with CARE and the World Food Program to support healthcare workers, and also to support WFP as they try to support with the peripheral items that are needed, providing non-food item supply chain. And I thought I'd use this occasion today, because I just got word just a few minutes ago before this, to tell Jeff, who I work very closely with, that our board has just approved $1.275 million for UNICEF to continue the great work that they do. So we're great admirer of UNICEF and the work they do to support children around the world. And they do a phenomenal job, and what they do is needed now more than ever. And finally, I'll just close that we believe at UPS that no community is too remote to help, and we believe that where you live should not determine if you live. And David, I'll turn it back to you at this point.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Excellent. That was really informative and pretty amazing, the reach that UPS has, especially with UNICEF. That's really quite complimentary. So thank you. Really appreciate that. So now we are going to go into the question and answer period. So all cameras on. I believe I see Phil, I see Jeff. So if we have any questions, by all means, everyone just enter them in the Q&A section. So I'm going to start with the first question, since I am the moderator, as soon as I find my question. So it's really quite interesting. And I think the fact that all three of you are dealing with this pandemic directly, and how it affects your jobs, but also how it affects the people that you're working with. Obviously, quite interesting that UNICEF and UPS are working with people from all over. However, VF is strictly working with people in the factories. So same thing, different perspectives. So what would each one of you do differently? If you had to work with the partners that you're working with now, and you were able to use hindsight, what would you do differently now than you've done before? Then what would you do differently than what you're doing now if you had any forethought into this pandemic? So why don't we start with Phil, if you could, and then we'll go through the order, Jeff, and then Joe.
Okay, so I think from VF's perspective, probably 2 or 3 months into the pandemic, we started converting our own manufacturing facilities into producers of PPE both in terms of gowns and masks. I think our learning was we could have really jumped on that day one and provided much better resources, not just for companies and industry in the U.S., but for the global factories. So I think that was probably our big takeaway, is just evaluating the seriousness of it, the expected longevity of the disease, and then move a little bit quicker. So and from a more departmental perspective, we had our objectives and our goals for last year, and we really weren't very agile when it came time to making those switches internally. What's the department going to do? How are we going to work with the factories? And we really took it as it came to us, rather than trying to be more proactive about how we addressed the issues we had or should have anticipated that we would have to deal with.
Unmute, David.
Jeff, you're up. Jeff, you're up.
Oh, there. Yep, I got it. Thank you. So I'm
Thanks,
going to
Steve.
answer this question under the lens of UNICEF USA. And so this is going to be really how we spoke with donors in the initial in the initial lockdowns and reaction to the pandemic. Really the thing that stands out to me is we would have spoken to donors meaning corporations, differently in the needs that UNICEF and the world's children had. In the beginning of the pandemic, we were approached largely by marketing teams. Again, we have longstanding partnerships with the foundations, such as UPS Foundation, but a lot of newer partners, particularly, were coming to us through their marketing teams, and it's understandable. When you think in the lens of what a corporation wants to do, other than general, the goodness of helping, but they're also looking to position their brands toward to be able to create some type of narrative around the philanthropy. And one thing that they were I generally say all, but really a large majority of these companies were coming to us with was they wanted to help with COVID. And when we would say, okay, this is great, we'll work with you. This is an unprecedented event. We have an unprecedented need. One thing that we found as the year went on and COVID started getting deeper and deeper and deeper into populations into Africa, particularly, which was I would say spared, but it was touching the continent lighter than it was Europe and the West more generally. Was we did not, as an organization, stress the need for non-COVID programming. And why is that important? It's because, if you take, for instance, measles, I forget the exact numbers, but between 2 and 3 million children a year die of measles. One thing that, as COVID went on, we saw that, and the lockdown started happening, that children were not getting their measles vaccines. And so, and then you also had instances of child abuse, child trafficking, things like this starting to really go on the rise during the lockdowns. And those are the things, education, children not going with school or proper materials for school. Those are the things I think we as an organization and organizations like UNICEF should have stressed earlier on, is that the COVID need goes beyond providing examination masks, examination gloves, and N95 masks, etc., PPEs. That protecting children also meant giving them the psychosocial support that they needed to get through the lockdowns and pandemics, and as well as providing stable schooling. And as I mentioned before, WASH. being able to make that link between strengthening WASH facilities to education and to COVID was something that we did as the year went on, and organizations like us did as the year went on. But it's something that I think that we should have done with our partners, from the onset, and tried to drive that message home earlier.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe, what would you do differently?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think there's probably a lot of things we would do differently. I think early on when the virus first appeared in China, we moved 4 million masks to Shanghai, which eventually went to Wuhan, which were needed. But what eventually happened was a shortage domestically, a global shortage for quite a while until suppliers could catch up, kind of left people shorthanded. And I think at that point, nobody really knew, what this was, and that it was so, that it was a pandemic. I would say that, from a foundation perspective, what we tried to do is be as flexible as we can with our nonprofit partners. There were many cases where we transitioned their programmatic funding to just let them keep the doors open. We kind of took an all hands-on approach. As I said earlier, we moved 4 times the number of shipments that we've ever had in one given year. And I'm sure there were, as Jeff said, programmatic needs that suffered. We run one of the innovation projects with Gavi, the last mile vaccine delivery network in Uganda, which was really one of the only programs that was running essential childhood vaccines, where all other vaccines were closed because they were locked down. So I think everybody tried to mobilize and go all in to help whichever way they could. I would say too, the thing that, hindsight being 2020, collaboration on pandemic preparedness and the efforts of preparedness and resilience need to be at the forefront. Hopefully in the future they will be, given what we've seen now, that health systems were probably not ready as they should be. Companies need to, have learned a lot around their business continuity and how they need to prepare for disasters. So those are some things that I think our company and businesses around the country and around the world have learned, that there's a great need to focus on disaster preparedness and have business continuity plans in place. Being able to adjust and make sure that your people can work remotely. I think it's been amazing how we've been able to adapt to a virtual world. We've probably moved 4 years, 5 years forward in terms of, the ability to work remotely, and escalated that e-commerce piece. So I think we continue to try to deliver what matters at UPS to move the world forward. And I never want to look back. At UPS, we don't back up. We move forward, and we don't make left-hand turns. We make right-hand turns. So we're just going to keep going right. Thanks, Dave.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joe. And thanks, Jeff and Phil, for your responses as well, because the continuity part was really key throughout all of your answers, and amazing how nimble all 3 of your organizations are to be able to adjust to this. But I think the continuity part, all 3 of you also spoke to, and I think that was, being prepared for something like this, and being able to keep the business continuity, even if your business is keeping continuity alive, right? So I think that was really fascinating. I've got another question here, and it was specific to Joe, but I'm going to open it up to the whole panel. Can you speak about your organizations' workforce development programs. In other words, it was specifically about the UPS Foundation's workforce development programs, but I think all three of you had to, again, with the nimbleness and be able to train your staffs and have your staffs also react to this in the proper manner. So what did you do to help prepare your workforce and developing programs and developing their skills in helping with the COVID relief in your job? So Phil, you want to take that first?
Sure. I think from VS perspective, the thing that was the decision made early on, obviously business was going downhill rapidly and at very difficult times, but VF made a decision to keep everybody employed. That's retail, that's manufacturing and so forth. So we had the support from the company that, people are important. We're going to need you as in the future. And what do we need to do to keep you on board? So that reassurance to all employees that they would have a job tomorrow and the next week and the week after that was probably the big driver that kept us together and kept us moving down the path. Now, in terms of training, we've got a very strong internal safety team, and they started developing the toolbox we needed to be able to go out to our contract facilities and what questions to ask and what to do as people on site, or when not to go on site and so forth. So we had really just a combination. We had that stability of employment, and then we had the programs behind it, and the team where we're not obviously medical experts. We learned a little bit about disease transmission and proper sanitation and so forth. And, we had some of our contractors doing some crazy things. They had one factory in Central America that was spraying everybody with a bug spray when they came to work in the morning. And so it's like, some of it is pretty easy you hear this like, stop. And then we had others who weren't doing anything. So we had really extremes, and it's all about taking what we learned and sharing it with the factory. So we did the factory training one-on-one. We did group training by country, and so we have probably about 500, about 5 million people in our supply chain. So it's quite a task to get that message out. But the team, rather than doing audits, we did training, we did communication, and moved forward in that. And as I told my management, we were doing year-end reviews, it's like the learnings we had this year, trumped any work we didn't get done. And
amazing.
We had skills that we didn't think we had, but they were there.
Nice to hear. Really good to hear. How about you, Jeff?
Sure, thank you. So our organization, we had started a transition to remote work kind of about a year prior to the pandemic. Largely, we have several remote offices outside of New York, two in Texas, Chicago, two in California, etc. One out in Atlanta, and so there was already an initiative in place to try and connect our central office in New York to our remote offices. When the pandemic hit, that really just kind of escalated the need for that type of infrastructure. We were very quick to understand the pressures that the employees of UNICEF USA would be under working from home, not just on a technical aspect, but on a personal and emotional aspect. So one of the things that was immediately instituted was that all staff would not be held to a 9-to-5 work day, but instead they'd be held to accountable for task. So if you had to have your work done at 8 o'clock at night because you have 2 kids running around and their schools are closed, or you had to do homeschooling, you would not be penalized for that. You just had to find a way to manage your workload. If you had to care for loved ones, also you were able to, and you were somebody who did not have to care for someone, but you have a colleague or a friend in the organization who did, we instituted the ability to donate sick days to those people so they can use those days to care for their children or their parents, relatives, whatever it may be. We also, at the same time, I should add to, oh yeah, real quick before I get to that, because it was an important point. We also gave early bonuses to make sure that people, especially our younger employees, would be able to make rent. So normally we do a standard of living increase, usually it's in July. Those were accelerated to make sure that people could, as a lump sum, so this way people could be make the rent if they needed that extra influx of cash. We also provided computers to everybody, so this way they didn't have to use their personal computers if they didn't want to, or if they didn't have sufficient computing capacity. We instituted as well stipends and reimbursements to upgrade home internet and infrastructure, or if you need to purchase any softwares or printers and things like that. So we were pretty fast to do that. There was ample training on that was provided by our IT team. Luckily, I think this is kind of serendipitous in the sense that we were already going through some systems changes at the time. So these trainings were already under development. So they just kind of got accelerated, and so we were able to go into those trainings really, as we all started going into remote. But one of the things I also wanted to bring up was at the time, really when everybody realized that this is going to be a long-term scenario, we had the Black Lives Matter marches and a lot of human resourcing needs going into being able to speak to our staff about diversity and about understanding of backgrounds. So there was a tremendous effort put into hiring. And we were actually already looking for new people in our human resources department, but there was a bigger focus now into diversity training and as well and that's become a core element in UNICEF USA's basically daily operations and everything that we do now, and every way we operate with our partners. So what we do, we have a committee now that reports to a new head of diversity and inclusion, which we have now at UNICEF USA, and they have provided us with trainings and with seminars and areas where we can basically understand the new world that we're in, and be able to bring that into our work. So that's been a huge component.
Wow, that is a huge component. It sounds like you guys were really ready for this. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know what, we didn't plan it, but it seemed like we were going in the direction that this took us. So
beautiful. And Joe, what would you say about your workforce development for your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of the same, items. First and foremost, making sure our people are safe. A lot of, hand sanitizer and making cleaning our operations. We changed our delivery procedures, as I'm sure many people know. We no longer require signatures so that we can minimize the face-to-face contact. There are many things that we did that most people have no idea that allowed our pilots to continue to fly when they fly to another country. Many countries wanted to quarantine them. We sanitized every time one of our planes, which would leave Louisville to go to Asia, they fly into Anchorage. When they come back, we would sanitize the cockpits. We would allow the pilots to stay on the plane if they wanted to. We provided them, personal drivers so they didn't have to take public transportation, all so that they would not have to go under quarantine so that we could get the plane back, get the flight back. But, ultimately, just a real focus on making sure that our employees have what they need. And we spent a lot of Zoom calls just talking to people, are you okay? And again, the flexibility that Jeff mentioned too. We've got a lot of young people who, young families with their kids being home at the same time, creating unique challenges. Our CEO saw fit to give us all a bonus and basically wiped out, the end of the year performance evaluation, just said, has this person been doing their job? Yes, that was it. So, just focus on what's wildly important and got rid of all the administrative stuff that, no one really had time for because we were all working, extensive hours from operations and even non-operations and even the foundation. I always tell people that, they think the foundation is a unique area where you go to a lot of events, but I'll tell them, I said, any day you want to spend a day, it's 6:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night, and we become operational as well. And that's the key thing about us is that the foundation, when we get requests from UNICEF and about 10 other partners that we transport goods for, the foundation becomes an operation and dispatching and coordinating shipments all over the world. So, it's all really about making sure that people have what they need. And even this month, our CEO, Carol Tomei, we call it Wellness Month and making sure that you're taking care of yourself. I think as we all look at, I think we just passed the 1 year mark, and many of us, I think that the first couple of weeks, it was sort of like, working from home is kind of a nice thing, right? And, a year later, it's not all that in a bag of chips. We miss the contact we have with our colleagues and our peers on a daily basis, and sometimes going from Zoom to Zoom can wear on you a little bit. So it's all really about just making sure that everybody has what they need, and I think our leadership at UPS has done a great job of making sure that our people have what they need.
Thanks, Joe. Great answer. Great answer. I think all three of you guys really had some phenomenal answers about that. Amazing how simple UPS had tried to make things, and we didn't even realize it. So I think that we certainly picked three good companies that were prepared for the pandemic and making use of this situation as much as possible. Really like to see that. That's really great. So I have one last question. This is going to be sort of a speed question. So you have to have a short answer, one sentence answer. But somebody asked, how did you find yourself in the position you're in and what drew you to your work? So why do you do what you do? So we'll start with Phil, but this is a speed answer. So you have one sentence as an answer, Phil.
I love manufacturing, and I love the people that work in manufacturing.
Beautiful. Good answer. How about you, Jeff?
Really, it's the children, and it's the commitment that our partners have to helping them.
And Joe?
Yeah, I think I'm a lucky person to have this job. We move the world forward by delivering what matters, and that's why this is such a great job.
Right. People. All three of you just said that. It's people. Delivering what matters to people. That's really great. Thank you very much, Phil, Jeffrey, and Joe. Really appreciate your participation. Really great getting to know you a little bit. And I just have a few announcements. First, I would like to say thank you to Professor Christine Pomerantz and to Stacy Sedaris for the work you guys have done to get this going, as well as Rick and his team of technicians. Thank you very much for helping us. And also thank you to the ITM Student Association, because they did a video just recently that we weren't able to show on this presentation. However, we do have a QR code that you could use and be able to view the video from there. And voila, here is the QR code. So I just have a couple of announcements. We've got two more Talking Trade events coming up for this year, and the next one is appearing virtually from 6:30 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4, is from the New York District Export Council, International Women's Entrepreneurial Challenge, and the Fashion Institute of Technology's ITM department invite you to a special virtual guest lecture on the occasion of World Trade Month, Empowering Women Leadership. Our distinguished speakers will discuss the importance of women leaders who embody critical leadership traits such as emotional intelligence, integrity, empathy, humility, and collaborative results orientation, need to make unique and extraordinary challenges and harness them into construction and beneficial solutions. That was a mouthful, but it's with keynote speaker Representative Carolyn Maloney. And the moderator is Nancy Ploger, Executive VP of International Women's Entrepreneurial Challenge Awards. And the panelists will be Negocia Caro from Custom Collaborative, Barbara Bahrain from Classic Rug Collection, and Irina Kapatanakis, Vice President of Sushi Incorporated. So that is a registration required, and registration closes on May 3rd. Excuse me. And as I said, the event is May 4th. The next event after that will be, again, sponsored by the New York District of Export Council and on the occasion of World Trade Month, Hiring Practices During the Pandemic. Will be held on Thursday, May 6th from 6:30 to 8 with Sonia Chapman as co-arranger and monitor. Professor Sonia Chapman is the Associate Professor of the Department of ITM at the J. and Patty Baker School of Business and Technology. And the panelists will be Esther Murray, from Principal Administrative Associate from New York Department of Finance and Certified Career Coach. And the next panelist will be Mr. Matthew Prail, Vice President, Golden Touch and Jacqueline Groups from Human Resources. And then we have a Marketing and Business Development Assistant, Ms. Victoria Selig. The panel will build on valuable skills, the interview process, and networking in the home-based workplace. This is a free event and no prior registration is required. Certainly sounds like a lot of the students will be attending that. So thank you very much, everyone. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. It was quite an interesting, and again, thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate the time. And Christine and Stacy and Rick, thank you very much, and have a great evening. Stay safe and keep wearing your masks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great event, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.